Billy the Pig and Burke the Goose in With the Luck of the Irish by Great Nocturne. Narrated by the author. Featuring art by Kobow. Part 1. Billy dragged herself through the door to her apartment. Her work backpack was slung over one shoulder as she fumbled to open the door with her hands filled with packages that arrived at her P.O. box. After kicking the door closed, she let the mail drop to the ground and her bag drop down with them. Stupid front office jerks. Go on vacation and can't even be asked to do anything before they leave, Billy huffed, wiping the stinging sweat from her eyes. Work had been hellish the past week at the nursing facility Billy worked at. Several agency nurses had decided to no-show today. Earlier in the week, they had a state inspection, and one of the newbies was trying to grab her behind. This on top of her being stuck on Paula duty. Lucky nobody was around to rat me out for punching that dumbass's lights out, she thought. The jaded nurse looked down at her body. She wore a full-body PPE, personal protective equipment, shaped like a buxom blonde woman, decked out in sexy nurse's attire. Paula duty was essentially when she needed to work on units with people who didn't care for anthro caretakers. The old, confused, or just people who were resisting care for anyone who wasn't human. Her being the sole anthro who worked at the facility meant that her and Paula got to know each other a lot. She plopped on the couch and reached down her shapely legs. Dogs are barking. Time to let them out, she said, before gripping the knees of her uniform and ripping through the white leggings and perfectly white synthetic skin. Her orange and black spotted thighs became visible from the opening that grew wider and wider as she worked her way to the feet of her suit. The footwear started to come off as the change from a dainty size 9 platform heel to a much more abnormally shaped pig hock allowed the heavy-soled shoe to simply slip off of her foot onto the floor. Next, Billy grabbed the part of her chest near her sternum and pulled. Paula's stacked upper body came apart like opening the center of a book. Billy's much flatter chest glistened with moisture from the suit, a combination of secretions from the skin suit and sweat, which, despite the fact that she was an anthro pig, she was capable of sweating. Most of the nurse suit fell in scraps to the floor as the last part left, the mask, remained on the anthro girl's head. She decided to simply grab the blonde hair and pull, the perfect features of the human woman becoming misshapen and stretched until Billy's own piggy-snouted face popped out from underneath. God, I need to remember to do all this at work instead, Billy said, tossing the mask and remaining pieces of the nurse suit onto her floor. Now I gotta waste a whole trash bag just to toss her in the dumpster. The pig girl went over to her fallen mail and did a quick inventory. 3 new dockies, some cosplay stuff, that bootleg Blu-ray of the show I can't find rips for anywhere online, and... She paused, shuffling through the junk mail. There were 4 letters. 2 were just for a membership at a pharmacy in town, and another because she donated to a charity once, 3 years ago. There was another envelope that caught her off guard. It was in a standard envelope, one you'd send a normal, handwritten letter to someone in. It was even marked with a stamp. To Billie Craicne from Lisa Nagai from Mr. Zip Worldwide Travels? Wait, a travel agency? Billy tore open the letter and skimmed the contents once before giving it a proper read. Dear Miss Craicne, we are delighted to inform you that your name was placed into a drawing for a free vacation. You, along with one other winner, will receive tickets and accommodations at a glorious castle on the coast of rural Ireland. Please take this letter to your nearest Zip Worldwide office and we'll walk you through the rest of the details of your prize. Sincerely, Nisa Nagai, Director of Promotions, Zip Worldwide Travel. The whole thing sounded fishy. I won? I don't even remember entering any contest to begin with. Billy was about to tear up the letter when the thought came to her. They want to meet at their office, and I think there's one in town. Why don't I go, check to make sure it's legit, and that the requirements aren't something stupid, like signing up for a timeshare? The pig girl threw the letter on the kitchen counter and headed for the shower. After a quick wash, she put on some clothes, bagged up Paula's torn bits, and took her car to the travel agency's local branch. Part 2. 2 weeks later, Billie was sitting in the first-class seat on a flight headed for Ireland. It was only 4 hours into her flight with another 3 or 4 to go. It was hard to tell since she would wake up and nod off to sleep thanks to the dosage of Dramamine she took before boarding. Next to her was the other lucky contest winner, a goose named Burke. Funny enough, Billie was trying to play a game on her handheld PC where a guy named Burke had her try to nuke a town. This was before her brain started to kindly tell her to screw itself on trying to do anything while the plane was moving and shaking, like a Dominican bride at a backyard wedding. Billie had been sneaking glances over to spy at what her traveling partner was doing. The gander was popping between several tabs on his tablet's web browser. The first was what looked like a blog about traveling around Ireland. Then he was watching some sort of cartoon Billie remembered from her childhood. Ironically, the characters in that particular episode were a pig and a duck. Then he looked at an encyclopedia about various hauntings from Celtic lore, and lastly, Arsonsoft's website. Arsonsoft was the world's foremost developer of skin suit technology. They were responsible for several of the suits Billie owned and supplied the nurse PPE that she used for work. The page was for a Scottish lass model of skin suit, with an eye-watering price tag of $25,000. This might have been high, but a current model custom skin suit that included cellular regeneration, the process of regrowing damaged parts of the suit by using a very specific chemical mixture, was a very nice new development. Billie took this opportunity as a chance to finally break the ice with her traveling companion. She always hated meeting new people, mostly because she was terrible at starting conversations. She just had to be careful with how she worded what she was about to say. "So you're into redheads, huh?" "Real fucking smooth, girl," she thought. The goose's face turned red as he quickly shut the screen of his tablet off. "Yeah, no, Billie threw up her hands to calm the man down. "Easy there. I wasn't trying to upset you or anything." She reached for her phone and quickly found an image that might help calm him down. The pig girl glanced around to make sure nobody else was looking and handed over her phone to Burke. "See this?" Billie whispered to Burke. "This is a picture of me and a friend from a set of a show from about a year or so back." The picture in question showed 2 women. One was a tan-skinned human redhead wearing a black t-shirt and sporting a pair of thick, square glasses. The other was Billie, but from the neck down she had a normal bust and regular human-colored skin. The clothes she wore seemed to be nearly a century-old in style, and below her porcine chin was the deflated face of a human woman, her hair the same length and color as the woman that was smushing her face up against Billie's. Save for the bi-speckled woman's bronzed skin, if Billie was suited up, they could have been considered twins. "See? I know about that stuff you were looking at." The duck's shoulders relaxed. "Wow, there must be an interesting story behind that picture." Billie smiled, though the last thing she wanted to do was spill the beans about that selfie's history. That girl, who felt like a sister in the 8 months they were together, was someone Billie had not spoken to since their work relationship had ended. The pig wanted to redirect the conversation. "So you're trying to get into the skin suit game yourself, huh?" Burke grinned. "I've been saving up to buy a suit, but it hasn't really been easy. That and I live with other people, so it's kinda hard for me to suit up and have fun, you know?" The pig nodded. "My name's Billie, by the way." "Yep, I saw your name on the travel file. My name's Burke." They shook hands, and from there, they spent the rest of the flight talking. Much to Billie's lament, the topic very rarely shied away from suiting. From care, to which she owned and used regularly, to the ones they'd like to own in the future. All the while, their fellow passengers around them were giving the pair odd glances for the remainder of the flight. Part 3. Billie and Burke arrived in the town of Dougal, Ireland in the late afternoon. The town was the smallest place that Billie had ever seen. No paved roads, no convenience stores, and they were pretty sure that they'd have no cell phone signal. Lo and behold, when Burke took out his phone to check his email, that was confirmed to be true. The pair read the written instructions given to them by the travel agency. The castle they were staying at was just outside of town. Which road, however, was either foreigner's guess. On the side of one road stood an old man in a newsboy cap who was chewing on a strand of straw. "Excuse me, we're trying to get to Castle Vana. Which road heading outside of town would we need to take?" Billie inquired, eyeing up the gentleman. The codger's eyes were barely visible underneath the brim of his hat. He looked like a lapsa apso trying to stare at the sun with scruffy beard, mutton chops, and eyebrows. "The castle's to the west path out of town. Follow the trail till you hit your stone wall and cross till you hit the gate. Can't miss it." Burke waved a thanks and started to turn when the man continued, But what?" the pig girl asked. "But I'd be careful if I were you. Dangerous things in that castle." Burke raised an eyebrow. "How come? Is it haunted or something?" "You'll see," the man said, spitting out his straw and starting to turn into the house behind him. The two foreigners stared at him as he went inside, then shrugged at each other before following the trail as he instructed. The road to the castle was fairly clean and calm, but as they reached the metal gate that was presumably the entrance to the property, clouds started to bunch together, making the sky pitch black and angry looking. Between Billie's strong nose that picked up the smell of ozone in the air and Burke's natural avian instincts at determining the severity of weather before it happened, they both knew the coming storm was likely going to be strong enough to trap them inside. They double-timed it to the castle's main courtyard and neared the heavy wooden front door just as a few drops of water started to fall. "Dude, hurry! Find the doorknob so we can get inside before we get drenched!" Billie pleaded as Burke first tried to find a doorknob before just grabbing the ancient-looking door knocker and ramming it into the door, busting his knuckles on the first knock. "Ouch! I wasn't even trying that hard! What the hell?" The duck was about to finish when a girl poked her head out from the opening crack of the door. "'Lo there, miss," the duck finished. "I'm Burke, and this is Billie. We're the contest winners that I'm sure you've been told about." The girl opened the door fully. I have," she said, pinching the ends of her purple robe and doing a gesture close to a curtsy. The girl, or more accurately, young woman, looked a few years younger than Billie, at least close to 20. She had shoulder-length, bright orange hair with a large white bow at the back of her head. Her body was completely covered in a purple robe with a thinner white bow securing the front, giving the outline of a bust slightly bigger than Billie's own, with good wide hips. Her eyes were as blue as sapphire. Billie thought the girl was pretty cute, almost a dead ringer for the girl she acted as once in the picture she had showed Burke on the plane. As for his impressions of her, hot damn, this girl is just adorable! The mallard at her side was swooning and posing as if he stepped out of a slice of life anime, with his hands together and his knees locked. If he started calling her kawaii next, Billie swore to herself that she'd pluck and roast him for the two women to share. The redhead, who was behaving like a good sport, blushed and said, "Why, thank you. It's not every day a lass like me gets complimented by such a handsome goose." Burke looked as if he would start to melt like an action figure in the sun. Billie nudged herself through the door. "I'm sorry, miss, but can we please come in before the weather starts to get worse?" "Oh, of course," the girl said, ushering her guests through the door. "Blimey, and right on time. It looks as if the storm is going to last all night." The pig turned around and yelled through her teeth, "Pick up your lower bill off the floor and get your ass in here!" Part 4. "My name's Bridie. I'm the caretaker of Castlevania and will be the one attending to the both of you for the entirety of your stay." Billie looked around the foyer. While the term castle was a bit generous, it looked bigger on the outside than on the inside. There was something slightly cozy about the place. Yet that coziness was cut by an eerie undercurrent, either from the storm or... where's everyone else? Bingo?" Burke asked. Despite his swooning over their lovely attendant, he seemed to actually be more perceptive about how odd it was that just one girl would be managing the whole place. "They'll be around soon enough. Right now, the three of us are the only ones that are here." Bridie walked over to a nearby table and picked up an oil lamp. "And what's that for?" "In case the power goes out. Better safe than sorry. Billie's eyebrows raised. Does she not have a cell phone or a flashlight or something? This thought didn't last too long before she noticed that the redhead's robe didn't have any pockets. This was compounded by the outline of her hips as she moved. Going commando, huh? Billie said to herself as she walked out of earshot. Yo, Billie, I think she's naked underneath that thing, Burke whispered. The duck moved ahead, nearly floating with the euphoria at his fantasies of the possibilities underneath Bridie's eggplant-colored gown. This guy's got redhead brain rot bad. Just the thoughts of an Irish lass walking around in a ragged robe without a thing to cover her presumably freckled butt, her fluff-topped front-facing kippers to the wind as the breeze comes in from the sea. Oh great, now I'm thinking weird too. Billie moved to catch up with the pair, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was there with them. Perhaps the caretaker was lying about being alone. Ahead of her, Bridie and Burke were stopped in front of a massive painting hanging on the wall. Ah, good. I wanted you two to see the previous owner of the estate. She gestured towards the wall. This was the previous lord of the castle, Bruce Banner. Bruce Banner? Like the Incredible Hulk Bruce Banner? Bridie let out a small chuckle. No, Sir Banner was a wonderful man. He had ownership over the land in the nearby town of Dougal. After the Second World War, the town had come under a crippling debt. To avoid this and to bring the land back to its former pre-war glory, Sir Banner made a deal to make the town prosperous again. In the end, however, he paid the ultimate price. The girl gestured towards a portrait of a woman who seemed eerie despite her peaceful and serene smile. This was his fiancée, Bonnie. They were due to be wed, but in order to save the township, she gave her laugh to a wizard in exchange for a massive amount of gold. Gold? How would a wizard have gold? Burke asked. Nobody knows, but between the late master and his unfortunately fated lover, please show respect to the castle and the furnishings while you're here. The pig and goose nodded as Bridie ushered them further down the hall. Billie felt something behind her and kept turning back to check. She thought that maybe it was an animal or one of those moving eye paintings on the walls. Something else was here, but they were staying out of view. Absently, Billie turned again as she followed their guide and mistakenly bumped into the girl from behind. Using her healthcare instincts and going against her nurse's training to never grab someone who was in the middle of a fall, Billie reached out to grab Bridie's arm, but adjusted at the last minute to grab the robe as it was closer. Forgive me for doing a John Carradine on you, but you're gonna faceplant on the floor with that damn lantern in your hands. Unfortunately, Billie whiffed her grab, grasping onto the girl's hair by mistake. The swine sucked in her teeth in discomfort as she went from remorse to confusion. The body of the girl in front of her continued to fall to the floor, but the strawberry blonde hair that was clenched in Billie's fist didn't go that far. She heard the sound of Bridie impacting the carpeted stone floor, and the single clang of metal as the lantern that was in the girl's hands landed safely on its base. It was then that Billie's eyes shifted to the mound of hair in her hand. She turned it and saw the familiar sight of an empty mask. As for who was on the ground...
Brad, you daft bastard! Get your arse up quick!
A voice with a masculine Irish accent came from the splayed-out purple robe on the ground.
Henry, quiet! The guests will hear you!
This time, it was a slightly higher, feminine voice, not as high as Bridie's, but still enough to give Billie the impression of a more submissive man. Burke stepped forward and the pile lifted up slightly. From underneath, two small figures began to look around. The one on the top half, which occupied the sleeves, was balding but had a fluffy pair of mutton chops. The other, who presumably was at the bottom of the totem pole, had a pointy beard and slightly longer hair. His eyes focused on Billie and Burke. "What's the matter? Never seen a pair of cross-dressing leprechauns before." The top man also looked at them before looking at his partner. "Henry, please!" The balding man gripped his mutton chops and pulled them down in exaggerated exasperation. Burke piped in. "You aren't a girl?" "Why? Disappointed? Wanted a roll in the hay with some lonely red-headed lass, eh?" asked the short man named Henry. "And of you, pig boy." "Oh, mierda, you did it now," a voice inside Billy's head said. The pig girl threw the mask onto the ground and seized the leprechaun by the arms. "First off, I'm a girl, you little bastard. And second, what the hell is going on here?" The feminine-sounding man gripped gently into Billy's arms to calm her down. "Please, miss, we didn't want to cause you any trouble. We were going to tell you eventually, but—" "Oi!" Henry barked. "We gotta get to a room before it comes." "Wait, it? What's it?" Burke asked, looking back and forth at the pair. As if on cue, a deafening shriek came from the hallway in the direction they had just came down from. "You're about to see right now, boy." Part 5. Out of the shadows came a horrifying figure, lanky and monstrous, with a flowing river of red hair and wearing a tattered dress. Glacadóir Craicne. "Brad, we gotta go!" Henry kicked Billie in the chest, causing her to let the leprechaun go. Brad looked at Burke and began pulling him by the leg. "Sir, we need to run." But the gander refused to move. His body was frozen in place. "Oh, sod the both of them!" Henry waved as he started running down the hall in the other direction to the approaching specter. Billie saw the banshee coming up on her fast, but just like her traveling companion, she couldn't bring herself to move either. But internally, something was going on that wasn't fear. It was some sort of primal urge to get angry. "You just gonna stand there and die, or you gonna fight?" the voice in Billie's head barked. The pig clenched her fists, and her eyes narrowed. She felt pressure as if they intended to squish themselves in her sockets like grapes. Her teeth ground. A puff of air shot from her nose disc. She positioned herself in a stance. "Get your thumbs out of your fists. Stagger your posture slightly, but not too much so you lose your balance when you swing." When the ghost got close enough, Billie reared her right arm back and swung her weight into a haymaker. She saw her fist approach the figure and pass through it. Her arm ran cold all the way up to her shoulder, as if someone had dunked it in cold water. Gasping, she adjusted herself, the ghost having swapped places with her. Billie tried for a left straight to the banshee's midsection. With a thrust, her fist actually connected with something this time. Now only her knuckles felt the chill as she saw the ghostly form recoil from the blow. Next came an ear-splitting scream that broke Billie's concentration. She broke off her fighting stance and gripped her floppy ears, shutting her eyes tightly in response to the painful shriek. While the pig was bracing from the attack, Burke's fear broke. Time seemed to move slow to him. He took into account the scene around him. He saw Billie within spitting distance of the monster she was engaged with, the little green-dressed man at his side who was trying in vain to pick up the duck's body to move him away, the heap with the robe and discarded mask, belonging to the pretty red-headed house attendant who met them at the doorway to the castle just under an hour earlier. Her face was turned up to face the ceiling, mouth open, eyes empty. It looked like she was paralyzed in fear at the present situation. Then Burke looked at the lantern by the disguise pile. The fire was still lit, flickering as the banshee and Billie danced. "Don't just stand there, Burky boy. Do something!" Burke reached for the lantern. He recalled his summer as a young gosling attending NYUK, a slapstick comedy camp that taught everything from selling pratfalls to throwing pies. Pie throwing was one of Burke's specialties back then. He could land a hit on a target with a cream pie at 30 meters without a tin and with the entire pastry hitting its mark. Burke weighed the lamp and took aim, letting his brain and natural avian instinct guide his throw to the target. He coiled back his arm and threw the lamp, hitting the banshee in the square of its back, nearly inches from Billie. He saw the swine duck back from the spout of flame as the ghost waved and spun in pain. The goose grinned. She didn't look like she was completely on fire, but even something was better than nothing. "Oi, both of you! Get your heads out of your asses and follow us!" Henry ran over to Billie and pulled her with all of his might. Burke felt tugging at his waist again and looked to see Brad had been doing the same. Billie and Burke's eyes met for a moment, sharing agreement to retreat. They ran in the opposite direction down the hall as the banshee continued to scream. The bearded leprechaun opened a wooden door and ushered them inside. Brad, Burke, and Billie dove in. Henry slammed the door shut, pulling an iron bar down on the middle and taking a handful of powder from a sack nearby, pouring handfuls onto the ground. Brad pulled Burke to get his attention. "Hurry! The both of you need to get into the middle of the carpet!" He saw a rug on the floor with a strange sigil on it and scrambled to stand in the middle. Billie followed him. After a few minutes of staring at the entrance to the room, Henry broke the silence. "All right. Should be safe for now." He turned away from the door and looked at everyone standing in the middle of the carpet. "At least, for a wee bit." Part 6. Just what in the wild world of sports was that? Burke asked. "Glacadóir Craicne," the light-voiced Brad answered. "Glacadóir Craicne?" Billie attempted to say, despite her complete lack of knowledge regarding Gaelic pronunciation. "It means skin stealer or skin taker in our language, you damn Yanks." Henry, foul and full of annoyance, walked over to them with his finger wagging. Billie's hackles went back up. "You point that greasy sausage of yours at me and you'll be disimpacting yourself for the rest of your life!" The pig was clearly, as her mother had always said when she, herself, was pissed off, letting the reekin out of the box. "I'll curse you," he countered, "and I'll kill you! Please, stop the both of you! No, we get dragged out here for some dumbass vacation. You put up some front about being just a sweet girl and don't tell us about the screaming putana you got running around here." "Miss, we were gonna tell you, but—" Brad stopped, and Henry, feeling the need to bail his buddy out of the pink-haired fire, started to explain. "Can't exactly tell somebody to leave when we're in the middle of a storm. Besides, we could tell you all about the Banshee now, but take it from me, girlie, you're just as doomed if you go out there than if you were to stay in here." If on cue, a tremendous boom echoed from outside. It was a good 15-minute walk to Dougal, and between the thunder, unfamiliar land, and blinding rain, he kind of had a point. "So you want us to stay here until the morning?" Billie asked, her temper somewhat tamed. Brad nodded. "Don't worry, girlie. We've learned a system to keep people safe as long as they listen to us." The balding man pointed at the salt line on the door and the carpet with the strange symbol they were standing on. "We got them from some fey neighbors of ours. Not enough to get rid of the dreadful lich, but—" He trailed off. Henry glanced at the line by the door again. "So, come the morning time, we can leave, right?" the goose asked. "Well, technically yes, but we'd prefer if you stayed," Henry answered, turning back from the door. "You both got a job to do, after all." Burke was confused. Billie felt the same, but with a big spike of anger on top of it. "And what type of job do you expect us to do?" "Well, they told us that you'd get rid of the Banshee." Brad took a deep breath and started his spiel. "A few months ago, someone from some agency sent us a letter. We never get letters here after the master of the estate passed away, but this letter had been addressed to us, as in Henry and I. It said that they could help us with the Glacadóir Craicne. Now, we had someone else come and try it several years ago, but they ended up failing. He's downstairs with the other unfortunate guests." "Others? What others?" Burke asked. "The previous guests we had. They all got turned into husks. The Glacadóir Craicne turns its prey into empty husks by staring them in the eyes. You can't touch it, but it can grab you." "But I was able to hit it," Billie said. "How did that work?" "Dunno," Henry chimed, "but you certainly did a number on her with that lantern." Burke's face went red. Billie rubbed her chin. "Maybe she's weak to fire?" "Well, we got all sorts of fire stuff down in the cellar." Billie poked Burke's side and motioned him to come close. "Listen," she started. "I don't think we got a choice in the matter, but we might be able to do something about the Banshee with the stuff they mentioned in their basement." The gander gave Billie a look like she was sprouting multiple heads. "I know it sounds nuts, but what other choice do we got? And if things don't look good, then we make a run for it, even with the storm." He nodded, then they both turned to the leprechauns. "All right, bring us to where your stuff is." Part 7. Burke watched Henry look out the corners of the open door and motioned for his party to follow. Billie, Brad, and Burke followed close as they were led to the basement of the castle. "Why is there a Banshee here, anyway?" Burke whispered. "The Glacadóir Craicne was the master's fiancée. Remember that story I told you? Burke nodded. Well, Master Banner made a deal with a wizard back in the day for money to help the town. I thought you said it was a mystery. Brad shook his head. That's only a story for the guests. Banner was going to sell his soul to a wizard in exchange for the gold. His fiancée intervened and was cursed by the wizard. They continued down the halls, constantly checking the corners for signs of the ghost that was stalking them. We came by a short time later and offered him gold in exchange for his castle, and he accepted. I was right about the housing prices going sky high. We made out like a bloody puka in the carrot patch. Henry rubbed his palms together. We stayed nearby to make sure Master Banner didn't pull out of his deal, using that disguise called the Guise of the Modest Maiden, Redhead Edition. Wait, Redhead Edition? There are other models? Billy raised. Henry added his own commentary. Aye, we know a wolver that dresses as a brunette to sell fish down during market day. With mask and robe, your body will become indistinguishable from a real woman's. Remember that blowhard who groped our arse about 3 years or so ago? Would have gotten a nasty surprise if we took him up on his offer for being his company that night. If the Banshee didn't get him shortly afterwards. Henry stopped outside of an old oak door. All right, this is it. Inside of there is our stores. The oil should be in the back. Now go in there and get... A shrill shriek echoed from the hallway behind them. Bollocks! You boys get in there and get what you need. Brad and I will buy you some time. Go! Get a move on! The two little men ran off, leaving Billy and Burke alone at the door. I'll take point, all right? Billy said, grabbing the door hook and pulling the heavy door open. She reached into her hoodie and took out her cell phone, shaking it to activate the flashlight function. Burke followed her inside, doing the same with his phone. Inside the room, there were piles upon piles of clothes lying in heaps. Jeez, they got an entire Sears clothing section here, Burke said, trying to liven the mood. Uh-huh. Look at that dude over there. She pointed to a pile that looked like it was dressed in a burgundy smoking jacket. Casper the Unfriendly Karen got to Hugh Hefner here. Burke stepped closer and swept his light over the pile. There was another layer underneath the clothes. Human skin. So that means the rest of these... Yeah, Billy answered, her voice quivering a bit. Burke turned back to see what she was doing. He saw the pig ramrod still, standing at one particular spot. There were two people crumpled on the floor. It was a pig man and woman. One was wearing a tux while the other was wearing a wedding dress, their hands interlocked in what Burke thought might have been one last attempt to hold on to each other. He felt a twinge of sadness from the sight. She ain't gonna get to me, Burke heard Billy whisper. Come on, Billy. We need to hurry. Billy and Burke headed for the door that led further into the catacombs. They swept their lights around inside, and in the middle of the room was a barrel, as well as another body. Guess this must have been the other guy that was supposed to help with the Banshee, huh? Burke picked up the limp carcass of presumably the hunter that the leprechauns had mentioned before. Underneath the man was a duffel bag, a stick, and several wine bottles. The goose pecked at the items. This stick he has here looks kind of weird. He picked it up and handed it to Billy. She twisted it around and said, This ain't a stick. It looks like a bomb. See? She pointed at the wick that was coming out of the charge at the end of the stick. Maybe if we light this thing and hit her with it, it'll be enough to kill her. Or who's ever holding it, Burke added. He rummaged around the duffel bag. There were several knives, a shotgun that appeared to be bent at a worrying angle, and a brass lighter. Take the lighter. We can use it on those Molotovs. Billy pointed at the wine bottles. They're Molotov cocktails, see? There was a spool of cloth around the neck of each one, which led down into the bottle. He actually knew his stuff. The way that these are made looks a little bit safer, so you won't end up with all the gas and fire on your hands when you go to throw it. Burke squinted. How do you know that? Internet. He took the lighter from the bag and reached back inside for another thing that grabbed his attention. A small leather-bound book. The cover had been badly aged, but Burke could make out the title. Monster Hunting by Evan Ricketts from the Darkened Cowhide. He leafed around inside a few pages and found one that was still earmarked on banshees. What's it say? The pig girl asked. Let me see. Burke quickly scanned the page. Banshees can turn people into things, they don't like fire, try not to stare them in the eyes, usual stuff. He closed the book and tossed it back into the bag. We can also kill it with sunlight. Billie and Burke both checked their phones. Dawn was another 5 hours away. Even if they survived, the storm was sure to cover up any light coming from the break of day. Guess we'll have to make our own sun, she said, holding up the mace. Burke pointed to the Molotovs. Here's what we can do. I'll toss these bombs at the Banshee, and when you get an opening, you rush at her with the stick bomb thingy. Does that sound good? No, but I guess that's all we really got, huh? She looked at Burke with a serious expression on her face. Listen, I need you to do me a favor. Burke raised an eyebrow. What kind of favor? When you're on your last 2 cocktails, I want you to shout at me, Plan B, and toss one directly at me. She looked intensely into the goose's eyes. One that's on fire. You understand? Burke looked horrified. But what are you gonna do? And why do you want me to save 2? One for me and one for you. I'll buy you some time after you hit me to make one last play while you do yourself in. What are you gonna do? I'm going to charge at this bitch like a fucking phoenix. The pig's voice cracked as she finished. Can't have you be the only bird around here. Burke was about to protest when the door burst open. Oi! You 2 kids ready yet? It was Henry, carrying an injured Brad over his shoulder. Because she's coming, and boy, is she mighty pissed off. Part 8. Burke, grab those bottles and stay out of sight. The gander scrambled to scoop up the bottles and quickly got behind a stack of barrels. Billie walked to the center of the room and smacked the mace against her palm like a baseball slugger. She was scared, but with no other options, she steeled herself for a fight. The Banshee screamed and flew into the room. She saw the pig girl and charged right for her. Billie dodged. A flaming bottle flew from the shadows towards the ghost. When the bottle broke, the liquid caused a decent flare-up that stayed lit for a few seconds before starting to die out. The pig shifted her weight and kicked. She felt her leg connect as the Banshee let out a yelp of pain. The ghost growled and swiped a claw, catching Billie in the shoulder. Gonna need to try better than that, she snapped, directed at both the ghost and Burke. She felt blood leak down her arm, but she wasn't sure how deep the wound was. Either way, she played through the pain. If I stop, I'm dead. Burke lit another bomb, popped his head out of cover, and threw. He saw the pitiful flame try to catch against the Banshee's body, but quickly died out as it did before. What the hell? Why aren't these working? He saw the pig girl make another attempt to hit the Banshee, who dodged and dove to stab with her claws. Billie sidestepped and came close to where Burke was hiding. Hey, I'm over here! Come get me! The Banshee flew again at her prey, and Burke lit another bottle. This time he made sure to hit the ghost straight on. He aimed, threw, and saw the bottle go through her body and hit a barrel nearby. Frustrated, he was about to light another when he just stopped and looked. Wait a minute. There's something different going on here. Sure enough, the Banshee looked strange in the light of the fire. She was right next to it now, and the light made her look less translucent and more tangible. That's it! Fire makes her vulnerable! This time, Burke aimed for the barrel that was full of oil near where the hunter's body was. The bigger fire from there might make the Banshee more vulnerable. Billie, get her to come to the fire! That's the only way to hit her physical form! The Banshee turned to face Burke, screamed, and made a beeline for the duck just as he threw the bottle at the oil barrel between them. Lakes of fire and smoke filled the cellar. He couldn't see where the Banshee was. All he could do now was hope that the pig would succeed. Now's my chance! Billie leapt through the circle of fire. Coming behind the Banshee, she lit the mace and heard it crackle like a 4th of July sparkler. Billie dug her trotters into the ground, gripped her holy flaming Louisville slugger in both her hands, and tightened her grip. The Banshee turned towards her and started to open her mouth in another scream. The pig greeted her opponent with a yell of her own. Take this, you shrieking bitch! Roaring at the top of her lungs, Billie swung the torch with all of her might. The stick collided with the form of the Banshee and shattered. A blinding light followed by a sound even more ear-splitting than the Banshee's screams. Then, she lost consciousness. Part 9. Billie woke up sometime later in bed, a familiar redhead looking over her. Welcome back to the land of the living. Bridie stepped off the side of the bed as Burke ran over. "You're alive! Thank God! I thought you were dead!"
"Gonna take more than that to kill me,"
she groaned.
"How do I know this ain't some sort of dream?"
Billie heard the sound of fast footsteps approaching her and felt a hard slap to the hip from a 2.5-foot tall figure. It was one of the leprechauns, wearing Bridie's mask. "Woke enough now, girlie?" They leapt onto the bed and planted a huge kiss on Burke's duck bill. "My hero," they said, yanking off the mask and tossing it in the air like a graduation mortarboard.
"Huzzah! The Banshee's gone! The castle is ours!"
Henry cheered. "Henry, please!" Brad, who was apparently on the bottom of the stack this time, draped off the redhead's robe and set it on the side of the bed. "Your boss is taking care of the people who turned back to normal after the Banshee was defeated." Billie squinted.
"Boss? What boss?"
On the other side of the room, the door cracked open and an old man stepped inside. "'Tis I," he said, taking off his cap and scratching at his bald head. "Wait a minute," Burke started. "Ain't you the old guy we spoke to in Dougal? If'n you give me a moment, I'll..." Finally, a finger poked through the skin of his scalp. He pulled his finger down to make an opening big enough to put both of his hands through, and started peeling both sides of his face like a banana. Another person wearing a disguise.
"Jesus Christ! Is there anyone in this damn country who is what they say they are?"
Billie snapped. The old man's face peeled away to show a youngish-looking Asian woman.
"Lisa Nagai, director of ZIPPR's East Coast branch."
Agent Nagai pulled open the first few buttons of her shirt, enough to give her actual chest some room to breathe.
"Nagai? Ain't that the one that was behind the contest, Billie?"
Lisa nodded. You almost got us killed!" Billie was about to leap out of bed, but Brad stopped her. "Please, you're still hurt."
"And I'm really sorry about that, but we have certain procedures. When we're searching for new recruits, we have to test them out with a live operation beforehand."
Burke and Billie shared confused looks. "Allow me to explain." The agent cleared her throat and sat down in a nearby chair.
"Our agency is looking for people with unique abilities. Since our organization prides itself in secrecy, we can only do this by finding people on our own.
We chose you, Miss Corneja, because of your abilities as a healthcare worker." Burke broke in. "And me?" "Simple. Because we need more birds. Thankfully, you both had extended specialties that proved useful to this operation." She smiled.
Miss Corneja's bravery and determination.
"Burke, your supreme visual calculus and problem-solving skills." The agent crossed her legs. "Now then, what should we do going forward?" The pair looked at each other. "First, I'd like to reward you for a job well done. As such, we're giving you both a free 4-day vacation to anywhere you want in the world, say for Alaska and Finland." "Lady, I just want to go home," Billie groaned. "I'm tired and beaten half to shit." "Well, that's okay too. You'll both be compensated for your time. As for the second offer," she reached into her pocket and pulled out 2 rolls of paper. "We'd like to recruit both of you to our team. There's a $25,000 sign-on bonus, discounts from several of our skin suit vendors, and low-level queue clearance across all agencies." "Does this discount cover stuff from Arsonsoft?" Burke asked. "We got them on a priority list. You'll pay just the manufacturing cost for them. It's about 30% of what they usually are sold for." "Sold!" the duck cheered. "We'll need you to sign some papers back in the States," the agent chuckled. "And you, Miss Corneja?"
"I'll think about it."
"Perfectly fine, my dear." Agent Nagai sprang from her chair and headed for the door out of the bedroom.
"I'll need to get changed before I head back into town."
"Henry, will you go to help her?" Brad asked. "Oh, fine." The short man hopped off the bed and motioned the agent to follow him. At last, it was just Billie, Burke, and Brad. "I know Henry can be..." Brad started.
"A colossal dickhead?"
Burke and Billie finished in unison. The leprechaun nodded. "He has a huge bias towards non-Fae. Master Banner was the last good human we encountered, really."
"So what's going to happen with you 2 lovebirds now?"
the pig asked. "We aim to try to make this a Fae hostel. There's not too many of us around these days.
Well, at least ones who are relatable like you, Henry, and I. Burke was fiddling around with the mask of the red-headed girl. So, uh, you're gonna pay us, right? With, like, leprechaun gold or something? Unfortunately, no. We spent the last of what we had to Banner back in the day, and we can't exactly give you anything in return for your help, Brad stammered. But you can keep that. He pointed at the mask and robe. I know you like it, Burke. The goose blushed. Well, I'm sure if the agency can hook me up. Oh, but that robe is magic. With the robe and the mask together, you'll be able to come as close to being a girl than anything you could simply buy at a store. Billy scoffed. Until he opens up the front flap to take a whiz. Well, there are always limitations, Brad shrugged. Anyway, take your time to rest. I must check to see how the other recovered people are doing. The leprechaun tipped his hat and ran out of the door to join his friend. Burke and Billy looked at each other. So, Billy, old buddy, old pal, you can keep it.
Hell yeah!
Burke wasted no time. He pulled the mask over his head, stretching the face over his large bill. Bridie's face perfectly reshaped the ganders. Next, he tossed on the robe over his body and tied the front. After sticking his hands out of the sleeves, he saw them transform from his own feathery digits to a pair of slender human ones. Lastly, he swished around to give Billy a 360-degree look at his new body. Fancy buying a poor girl a cold pint after everything she's been through? He said, his voice a perfect ringer for the lass who had greeted them at the beginning of the previous night. Billy burst out laughing. She got off the edge of the bed and put her hand on Bridie's shoulder and grinned. Dude, I think I've had all my fill of Irish women for one lifetime. The end. This was an audio recording of With the Luck of the Irish. All title characters belong to their specific owners. Billy Corneja, the pig, belongs to Great Nocturne 357. Burke the Goose belongs to Wearing Irishwomen of FurAffinity. Cover and thumbnail art by Kobow of FurAffinity.